Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. You know what it's like when you have the first party for a long time, right? And you're thinking, will they come? Will they not? Do they still love us? Do they not? Do they even know who we are? We worked really hard at the guest list for today and the invite list, thinking about who actually has a lot of influence on the charity sector, who actually talks to an awful lot of charities. Partly selfishly because we want to get our messages to you so well that we're all working on this harmoniously together. But also we want to hear from you. This is a two-way engagement today. So this is not us just talking at you, and I've said that to a few people in the room already today. So a hugely warm welcome and thank you for making your way here. Mark, thank you for the welcome to this building. We chose it quite specifically because we thought it's central, it's handy, it's easy parking, and it also gives out a message about putting back in and actually working together with the sector. So that's something we wanted to do quite specifically today, and they made it very easy for us by having such a lovely venue. So I do hope we all enjoy it today, and people want to take up Mark's kind offer to have a look around, and I know that there's already a few people who've been saying, oh, I'm thinking about that. So that is good. Want to just also say it's lovely to see faces old and new from my point of view, and if you feel like you're one of the old ones, apologies if that makes you feel bad, but what I'm actually thinking is that there are people here I've known a very, very long time. Tim and I won't even talk about how long we've known each other, but it is a really long time. And the same with lots of others. So great to see people, great to see people putting names to faces with some people, but also great to meet new colleagues, and I hope you do take the opportunity to network today. I also just want to do a great name check out to a lot of the staff team who are here today from OSCR. I'm going to ask those who are currently on the staff team to get to not to do a stand up or anything embarrassing, promise, but if you could just put your hand up and wave so that people know that there's a nice mix of folk out there, and if you want to just talk to anybody informally about anything, quite often you don't want to ask a specific question. If you're just thinking, she looks like a friendly face, I'm going to go and nudge. Also, we will ask those people mercilessly to join in with us later on at the Q&A, because Marieke and I were already agreeing that there will be complex questions that we'll know generic parts of the answers to, but then we want to bring colleagues in, so we'll do that part slightly interactively later on. I also want to just say there are a couple of people from the staff gone by who used to be part of the organisation here. So a warm welcome to Caroline and Jude sitting up at the back. And as I want to say a thanks to all the staff who have made the organisation what it is today. That counts for past staff as well as staff present. So I think we are an incredible organisation. I would say that, wouldn't I? But I do think that we are a really strong, vibrant, engaging organisation, and we do our work well, and we couldn't do that without the incredible resource. Like almost every charity and almost every organisation represented here, what we have is, thanks to John and his team, we have some pretty good tech. I would normally be saying not great tech in the public sector, but we've got some pretty good tech and some marvellous staff, and it's the staff who make the organisation work. My name's Maureen Mallon. I have been the Chief Exec of the organisation for almost 5 years now. It's all moving along terribly quickly. Sometimes it feels like 5 minutes, sometimes it feels like much longer. And I was saying to people, I used to have just some grey, and now I'm fairly rocking the silver, I think, hopefully. I spent a long time in the sector, predominantly working for a long time latterly in YouthLink. I was there for almost 14 years before coming into government as an inspector and working alongside Bill and other colleagues within HMI and then Education Scotland, and coming to OSCR. It's a really fascinating place to be, being part of a regulator, and we take the job of both prevention and actually dealing with things as they come in very seriously. So that proactive, reactive is the balance that we try to strike regularly. There's been so much happening in recent times, and I'm just hugely proud of the whole team working alongside our board members. I'm not going to name check those because I'm going to leave that to Marieke. She's going to do that shortly. But we've been working really together to deliver the last corporate strategy. And I suppose I was stopping and reflecting. You know, when you bring out a new strategy, you think about what happened over the last 3 years. And I think it's an absolute natural progression, what we've been doing. We've been getting much better at taking really strong evidence-based risks. And we've been getting really good at, as Martin would say, and might say later on, so sorry if I steal your thunder, Martin, we're getting out the road of a lot of things. We're saying that's not a big enough deal for us to get involved in. We've been getting really good at that, getting on top of what was an enormous workload, and people felt that they had burdens so much at the time. I know when I came to the organisation at first, people would talk all the time about the volume of work that was constantly sitting on our backs. And what we've been trying to do is to move that so that we are in a much more dynamic space. And over the last 3 years, all credit to the organisation, I really do feel we've managed to do that. And we're ready for this smart, agile future that the next corporate strategy takes us into. And Marieke will talk a lot more about that. One of the things that we absolutely need to know is the scale and scope of the charity sector. I don't mean to sound cheeky, but I almost never trust anybody who says they have a really good understanding of the charity sector, because as soon as someone says that to me, I'm thinking, no, you probably know about a niche of the charity sector. What you don't know about is the breadth and the bizarre richness and wonder of it, everything from universities to organisations of this scale. People will often talk to us about the staff and how the staff feel about charities, and that the multi-year funding is one of the biggest things facing charities. And then I have to say, well, no, it's not. It's the piece that's facing quite a large proportion of charities in certain spheres. But for the great majority of charities, that's not what they're thinking about, because the great majority have no staff and are very small indeed and are doing incredible things on very little money and a few volunteers. So we always need to be using our data to truly understand that. So we are complete data geeks, and we make no apology for that. We are very proud of the data that we hold, and we want to make sure that people use it more and more. I was delighted in some of the conversations I had earlier on, and I'm waving at my colleague who I've finally managed to meet in person from Volunteer Scotland, who was saying, actually, we love the stuff coming out quarterly now, and it's really, really helpful, because if you're smart, you're using our data to inform your work, whether you're a funder, whether you're an organisation applying for funding, whether you're a policy maker, whether you are trying to influence policy makers. No matter who you are, using our data is an incredibly smart thing to do, because it actually gives you that evidence base, along with the anecdotes that are always marvellous to have. So we've got a data set which is rich. It takes you into what's going on in sectors, what's going on in particular interest groups and purposes, what's going on in geographies, and also you can break it down into the size of bodies. So going in and having a look at it, please go and interrogate the data if you haven't done it before, because you'll find something that will be really useful to you, I'm sure. And I am hugely chuffed, and some of the people that are in the room just now who really made that happen will be blushing if I name check them, so I won't do that. But we have taken the data that we already had and done something really smart by making it that quarterly live thing. So thank you to those people, you know who you are. The sector is so significant in Scotland, and I'm looking at my notes here just to make sure I get the numbers right here. You've got an income in the charity-specific sector of approximately 15 billion rather, and employing well over 200,000 people. See, looked at my notes, didn't work at all. Should just keep talking. I knew those numbers, still looked down. But almost everyone in Scotland has an incredible link to charities. And I think that's a really good thing to hold on to. Sometimes when you're in this world and it can feel like quite a lonely burden that you're carrying about certain things, almost everybody uses a charity service, engages in volunteers, don't even think about it as charities. And sorry, Tim, but I go back to my Youth Link days where I couldn't even get people to talk about being in youth work, because they would say, actually, I'm not in youth work, I'm a Brownell. And I think, okay, well, if you do that, you certainly don't think you're part of the charity sector, because people get obsessed with their own part, but it's an enormity. We do an awful lot of work with those charities across the board, and we make sure that our guidance is generic but also specialist, and I think we're getting smarter and smarter about getting to the right people with the right things. And you'll hear about projects and programmes we're doing later on that are really helping to tailor that, because that's what we're increasingly about, not trying to give the same messages to all people, but actually do that in a really smart basis. Almost nobody tries to do anything wrong, and that's a lovely thing for a regulator to say. The things that happen that are wrong are mostly because people don't know any better, and I hate it if that sounds patronising, but it's factual. People stumble into doing the wrong thing, and then we have to walk alongside them while they try and get that right. Looking at the numbers in the last 12 months, we had 409 concerns about charities, some of which were multiple concerns for sure. And we can talk about being under 30 in the ones that we had to really take really strong action with. And if you took that against the 25,000 charities that are out there, and you think about all of that, we're looking at such a minuscule amount of robust action needing to be taken. That doesn't mean that we're talking ourselves out of existence, because I think the prevention is the main thing that we are about. And I listen to my amazing colleagues as I walk up and down the corridors in our Dundee office, talking time and time again about how to make things better by yourselves, how to actually make sure that trustees are the name of the game in actually making the robust decisions that need to be made. And half the time we're telling people not to come to us, but to go and talk to the trustees themselves. So today you're going to hear about our strategic direction. That's what we're about today. And Marieke, who is our new wonderful board chair, she says, just setting her up, I have never worked with a better board, and I'm not saying that because there's quite a few of them here in the room. We've always had great boards, we always attract great people, and the board we have just now are a great balance of strategic and thoughtful and engaging with us. And Marieke is going to take you through what we're doing in strategic direction. You're also going to hear from Laura and Martin about what we're doing about inquiries, and also what we're doing about our regulatory priorities. And we want to hear from you about that, because we've looked long and hard about the what and why that we've set, but we do want to hear and modify as we go. We don't want to be the sort of organisation that's just coming and telling you what we're doing today. So please do use feedback. Some people will want to do that on the day. Some people will want to write to us after they've had a right good think. And some people will want to just give us a phone. So please do that. Talk to us and talk to each other during the day. This should also be a bit of a networking event. It was lovely to hear the buzz already today. So I do hope we're going to have a thought-provoking, really interesting day. And without further ado, I'm going to pass on and welcome Marieke. So let's hit the buttons. I didn't hit the button. Did you see me not hitting the button after John told me to do that?
That's your thank you.
And that's for you. See, we're going to go
right.
There you are.
There we are.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. Right. Good morning, everybody. As Maureen's already said, it's absolutely lovely to see so many people here in the room today. You called it the first party you've organised for a long time. It's the first in-person event that I believe that OSCR has organised since the pandemic. And just looking at a room full of people like this, and being able to meet and speak to people, and to see so many new and familiar, there's quite a few familiar faces for me in the room, is for me an absolute pleasure. I mean, online working, it serves a purpose. We can be functional, we can do the job, but actually this really enhances what we do. And I think as time has gone by, I think we've all really learned that. So I really value this opportunity. It's my first time speaking at an OSCR organised event, and as Maureen said, I'll be taking you through the corporate strategy. But before I introduce the new strategy, I should probably introduce myself and my board colleagues. My name is Marieke Dwarshuis, and I've been in post since last October. And I think I can still get away with saying I'm the new chair, but I am not new to charity regulation. Some of you will know that I was a member of OSCR staff. I wasn't remembered by Maureen, but I have been a member of OSCR staff between 2005 and 2010. So I was a member of the senior team that was there to set up the regulator and really prepare it for taking on its functions in 2006, and then work on the first 5 years of working with those functions. And I left in 2010 to do new things, having very much enjoyed my time with OSCR. And I've since been involved in regulation in quite a number of other areas, in housing, in food, in energy, in different sorts of capacities, either as a member of staff or as a board member of another regulator, or as the member of staff of an organisation that was there to actually to an extent hold a regulator to account on whether it did a good job. And I've seen lots and lots of different regulatory approaches, and I think that really helps in now working with OSCR again. And because I've been involved in regulation so much, I really believe in the contribution it can make. And I think OSCR itself makes a really positive contribution to the health of the sector. And so I am absolutely delighted to be able to contribute to the work of OSCR again. So we have a board of 8. And prior to my appointment in October last year, in April last year, 5 new board members were appointed. So we have quite a new board as well. And that brings fresh insights and energy to the organisation. So unlike Maureen's kindness of not embarrassing people by asking them to stand up, I am going to ask the board members who are here today to stand up. And that is partly so that you will know who they are and that you can maybe seek them out and have a chat with them lately. So in the room, we have Neil Mackay. Here's Neil. Morning. Robin Strang, and Bill Maxwell. And we also have Jess Wade, who is in fact not a new board member at all, and probably quite familiar to a number of you. Jess has already been on the board of OSCR for 7 years. So do take the opportunity to speak to us during the breaks and over lunch, because that is, of course, one of the reasons why we bring people together, so that we can actually speak to each other. And as Maureen says, we love to hear from you. That's the business we're in. We need to hear how what we do has an impact on you, what you think about it, and how we can do things better. So an awful lot has changed since I was last directly involved with charity regulation. I remember working on the draft SCIO regulations in 2010. And they then came into force in 2011, after I left. And by the end of that year, 20% of new applications for charities were for SCIOs. Last month, 66% of all new applications were for SCIOs. And in fact, a total of 25% of all charities on our register are SCIOs. So that just shows the amount of change that has happened in governance issues within the sector. But really, it's just a small matter when we look at what has happened in Scotland since the launch of our last corporate strategy back in 2020, and what forms the context for our corporate strategy now. The COVID pandemic broke out just round about the commencement of the previous corporate plan and resulted in a great amount of change for everybody, for all the organisations we all worked in, and how we work, how we related to each other, the priorities that we might have had to reassess. And we're now sort of coming out of that, but we're experiencing an economic downturn. And that brings with it a range of different challenges that may have a long-lasting effect across the sector. In the meantime, the Scottish Government is looking at public service reform, which is likely to have an impact on the delivery of public services in the long term. And we're seeing a squeeze on how much money is available in the funding for all public services, and we're not isolated from that. But OSCR responds and continues to respond to all these challenges. We've made changes in our organisational structure. Over the past few years, we've embraced flexible working, we've increased the use of automation. All of that has ensured faster handling of incoming cases, as Maureen said. We've invested resources in the development of OSCR Online, which we think has given better value to charities, but also now provides us a platform for looking at an improved annual return process. And we're working actively on that currently with the input from the sector. We're also working in partnership with others. And an important partnership, and I really like to talk about this, is our work with Foundation Scotland, where we're working jointly to identify trusts that are held by charities that have fallen dormant. By working with these charities together with Foundation Scotland, we've been able to help trustees think about whether they can reinvigorate these charities, and if they can't, whether it's perhaps more appropriate to merge these charities or wind them up, and in doing so release the funds that are held for other charities to use for public benefit. And that work alone has released £2.3 million back into the sector last year, and we anticipate that in this year it will be 2.7 million. So it's a really, really valuable piece of collaborative working for the sector. And of course, a key factor in our operating context over the past year and the coming years has been the creation of the bill. I should call it the Act, really. I think royal assent was given last year, and its full proper name is the Charities Regulation and Administration Scotland Act 2023. I shall call it the 2023 Act, as opposed to the 2005 Act. I think that's easiest. And the measures in the 23 Act we expect to be implemented over the coming year. And they fall into three broad categories. Most of you will know this, but it's important just to remember that because it sets an important piece of concept for our corporate strategy. First of all, the Act brings Scottish charity legislation up to date with the rest of the UK, in particular in relation to the automatic disqualification of charity trustees. So it ensures that Scotland is consistent with the rest of the UK and isn't a more lenient regulatory environment for those who might have been disqualified from being a trustee in England, Wales or Northern Ireland. Secondly, and I think this is quite important and this will be relevant to everybody in the room, the Act responds to what the public have been saying by increasing transparency and accountability in charities. For example, once the measures have been implemented, all charities will be required to publish their accounts via the OSCR website, and OSCR will hold a public list of charity trustees for people, the public generally, to see who is making decisions within individual charities. So that's a charity trustee database. And thirdly, and again that's very important for how we do our work, some measures in the Act improve the powers available to OSCR, amending these and refining them to improve our effectiveness. A good example of that is that OSCR will in future be able to investigate potential wrongdoing from individuals or charities, even if they resign from being a trustee or remove their organisation from the register. And you think, well, why wasn't that the case already anyway? But it wasn't. So if somebody resigns as being a trustee, or if the charity was removed from the register, we had no locus to do anything about it anymore. So these are important changes which will contribute to shaping our work over the next few years. And now that the Act has received royal assent, there will also be the need for revised secondary legislation, and we'll be working with our Scottish Government colleagues on that. So, to our corporate strategy then. Taking all of these changes and challenges into account, the board, together with the staff, worked very hard to sort of hone that down to 5 priorities for the next 3 years. And the first 3 that I'll mention are externally focused and most relevant to you. And there are another 2 priorities which are more internally focused, but not exclusively internally focused. So I'll just mention them. I think you've probably read them elsewhere already. So we say that we will, first of all, ensure that the public have access to the information they need about charities in Scotland and how they are regulated. We will provide charities with the tools and guidance they need to meet their regulatory obligations. We will deliver smart, responsive and effective regulation that positively impacts on Scotland's charity sector and its beneficiaries. We will focus on our people and have a motivated, flexible and well-supported workforce. And we will, throughout all this, maintain a focus on best value, continuous improvement and collaboration. Well, these are fine ambitions. I can hear you think this. Marvellous. Who wouldn't agree with them? Yes? Ensure access to information about charities, provide tools and guidance, deliver smart, effective regulation, focus on collaboration. But what will that actually mean? You know, what will that mean for you in the room? How will it affect you? What will we be doing differently? So we've taken great care in this new strategy to be clear about how the strategic outcomes will drive our activity and what activity you can expect to see from us in the coming years. So I think I'm really, really pleased with our strategy and how it's set out. And sometimes when you read these strategy documents, they can be a bit dry. You sort of think, well, it doesn't really tell me anything about what they're going to do. Read it, look at it, and don't just look at these overall priorities. Look at what it says about what we will focus on in terms of our work, and it will give you a really good sense. For example, through delivering this strategy, we will see OSCR moving to being a much more targeted regulator, and doing so by enabling more self-evaluation by charities. So that's the direction we want to go in. We want charities, we want to create really an ethos between OSCR and charities of getting things right first time. And through helping charities to deal more proactively with their governance issues, we, as a regulator, will be freed up to do the complex things faster, and allows us to be responsive where it is needed and get out of the way of those charities that do the right thing and do them well. So that's one big thing about how we are driving to do things differently. We also want the regulation for the vast majority of charities in Scotland to be as frictionless as possible. So we want to reduce the amount of time that is spent in engaging with the regulator. For example, this is a focus of our own processes, such as the annual return process, but we will also review our relationship with partner regulators and with similar organisations with the aim of creating new frameworks for collaboration. And in doing so, we will try and find ways where possible of sharing relevant information between regulators and other public sector organisations more effectively, with the aim of removing duplication where possible. We'll still, of course, importantly, maintain high standards of data protection. And because as a board, we were very clear that we want to be transparent and accountable, good regulatory principles, in all aspects of what we do, we have included public success measures for each of these strategic outcomes to help us and you see whether the changes we are seeking are actually happening. Now, it is not easy to measure some of these things, and we had to think about this really hard. And some of these, many of you will be involved in evaluation and outcome measures. They might be proxy measures, but we're on a journey on this, and we want to find ways of actually seeing the impact that we have and whether what we do is actually achieving what we want it to. So any feedback on that also very gratefully received. But today we want to talk to you about two important ways in which we are going to put one of the strategic priorities, the priority of delivering smart, responsive and effective regulation, into action. So we'll set out how these developments are going to shape our relationship with you and how they're going to shape our work. And as Maureen says, we really welcome your input to that and your views, your thoughts, your questions. Now, targeting action only where it is needed is one of the most important principles of good regulation. And targeting in this way enables us to use our resources to best effect. So one thing we therefore want to do is to evolve from the regulatory risk framework that we initiated in 2016 and reviewed in 2018. Now, that risk framework was a really important step in OSCR starting to be much more of a risk-based regulator. But it does reflect the risks and priorities as they were then and as we saw them then. And this is very important, it was almost entirely just based on our case-based activity. Now, the new regulatory priorities, and I hope that some of you have had the chance to see them, but Martin and John will talk about them later on today, will help us to focus and target all of our regulatory activity. And that, again, relates to something that Maureen says. It's much more about the cases and looking at the requests that came in from charities about whether they can do something or the concerns that we've had. Being a good regulator actually means that you have to help people to understand what the regulatory regime means, what they have to do to be able to comply with it, and to also report back on it. So it will also, these new regulatory priorities will also, for example, have an impact on our choices about what guidance we will provide and how we will provide it. It will have an impact on our monitoring of annual reports and accounts and how we do the analysis of other intelligence and data that we hold about charities. And it will have an impact on how we will focus and prioritise the use of our new powers under the 2023 Act. So identifying the best approach to a particular regulatory issue within finite resources means that we must make choices. And we know that being able to explain the choices that we make in that respect and the rationale for them is vital for maintaining your confidence in us as a regulator. I know that people can sometimes have an expectation from their charity regulator, from any regulator for that matter, as the great enforcer. But that's not really the type of regulator that we are. It's not the type of regulator that we want to be, that we can be, and nor do we think that it's particularly effective. It is not effective as a use of our resources, and nor as a means of assuring and maintaining high standards of governance in the sector. Good regulation is as much about education, and good regulation is also about following key regulatory principles of transparency, fairness, proportionality, and targeting action where it's needed. So Martin and John will therefore talk later this morning in detail about the proposed regulatory priorities and how these will shape our work. And following the regulatory principles I'm very keen on regulatory principles. I think you've probably picked that up by now. But the regulatory principles of being informed and being transparent, we want our sense of what our priorities for regulator activity should be, to be informed by your views and your thoughts and your experience. So the views and insights from charities, trustees, their advisors, their representatives, other stakeholders are very important to us. But before we talk about the regulatory principles, we will also talk about our inquiry policy. And you'll probably have seen that in June, we published our new inquiry policy. And the subtitle of that is actually more informative because it says, how OSCR deals with concerns and inquiries. It's a very important piece of new guidance. And it sets out our role as a regulator and the boundaries of that role. And how in the casework, and now we're back to casework again, that is generated by concerns and inquiries, we will focus our efforts on the issues and the charities that are most likely to undermine public confidence. Laura and Kenny will, after I've stopped speaking, be talking about the scale of our inquiries work and how we have developed and clarified what we do in that work on the basis of our experience in the past few years. They will take us through how our concerns about charities are dealt with from beginning to end and what you can expect when you raise a concern about the charity. And we want to know what you think of our new approach and what questions you may have about that. So I'll finish very shortly. Looking ahead, we have a very important shared interest in the near future, as we, of course, like you, are looking forward to the Scottish Government's wider review of charity legislation, to which the Cabinet Secretary, Shirley-Ann Somerville, gave her commitment during the recent parliamentary proceedings on the Charities Act. We very much look forward to hearing the views from all the stakeholders and gaining, by doing so, a much more comprehensive sense of what is actually changing in the sector and what's important to people. We will very closely listen throughout that process to all the issues that are raised by charities and their stakeholders during that review, but we will ourselves have a contribution to make to that discussion as well, in particular on any issue related to regulation. But for now, we want to hear your feedback on what we've set out in our strategy, your feedback on our regulatory priorities and the inquiry policy. And we hope that with your feedback, we will be able to achieve our ambition to continue to focus on the most important issues in the sector. So I very much look forward to our discussions, but most of all, I want to thank you for coming today. Thank you for listening to me and the others. And most of all, I want to thank you for contributing to today. Thanks very much.